Hi, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for
Thanks.
having me.
Yes, kapamilya.
Of course.
Nice to meet you as well. And it is such a great honor to talk to you. I've been a fan of your excellent documentaries.
Thank you, Manny. That's so nice of you to say. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. And congratulations on the Thousand Cuts. It's a riveting, thoughtful, hurtful, but it's also a bit hopeful documentary. I was frightened. I even cried. So many emotions. Truly one of my favorite films this year.
Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you.
Oh, so
I'm
let's
o- I'm overcome.
oh, no, so let's begin with the basics. You've set your sights on Imelda Marcos' journey and Arnel Pineda and A Busy Maternity Ward, a fantastic film. So why Maria Ressa and press freedom in the Philippines? What got you interested in making A Thousand Cuts?
Well, my first interest was really when President Duterte became president and the drug war started happening. And I don't know if you saw, you probably saw all the photographs that came out of in 2016 of the drug war. So I really couldn't avert my eyes. Something was happening, and I felt like, and I'm a martial law baby. I grew up in Manila, so I know martial law.
Yeah.
So were you. So I felt like, oh, what is going on? And the impunity. And yet he ran on the drug war, right? He said he was going to do it, but to actually see it being done, I got kind of, so I went to the Philippines to see what was going on, right? At the end of 2017. And I realized a lot of people were doing the drug war already. A lot of films have since come out about the drug war. And then I looked around, and Maria Ressa was the one calling out the drug war and the numbers, and she was getting, the president was not so happy. So I turned to Maria, and she was also talking about disinformation, right? And disinformation, I think, is a global story, but she was connecting that to the drug war, to impunity, and she was talking about algorithms when people were not talking algorithms yet. So I thought, this is more global and yet specific, because I always wanted to be specifically Filipino, but universal in theme and scope. And so she just became the obvious center of the film as it went along. And, she's very articulate. She's very charismatic on camera. She has a lot of energy. So, what's not to love, right? And she stands for a very, very big issue of the day, which is press freedom.
Yeah, that's right. I know, how long did it take you to finish the film, from inception to Sundance?
Oh, from inception to Sundance. So 2018 to 2020. So 2 years. So
Wow.
it was very fast because it was an unfolding story, right? It happened immediately. And I think people understood the importance of the story.
I love storytellers like you. The Kingmaker partnered with this. I mean, it tells a much bigger picture. So, Ms. Ramona, paint the picture for us on how you perceived Maria Ressa, the woman at the center of the documentary.
I perceived her to be a very courageous woman, right? She's very clear on the role of journalism, the role of an independent press, and she's very clear that without that, there is no democracy. And that's why it's called the fourth estate, right? It's very important. And she is at the very core of her being a journalist. And she really shines the light. Independent journalism is there to as a check on power, right? And if power doesn't want a story told, they go after the independent press. So she's a courageous woman, and she does not stop. Right?
Right.
Everyone tells her, choose your battles. She goes, this is my battle. And, I have to go all the way. She's truly courageous in that way. She really is.
Now, along that same line, though, paint the picture for us on how you see President Rodrigo Duterte. Who is he, in your opinion?
I think he's, he came on the scene in 2015 when he was run. I mean, he'd been on the scene a lot, but not on the national scene. Obviously, he was mayor of Davao, which is a southern town, city in Manila. So he was a local politician who jumped from local politics to national politics, first ever in the history of the country. No other president did that. They usually go from senator to president. Senator is national, right? Because the whole country votes for the senatorial slate, but not President Duterte. So I think he was an outsider, and he came into like what people call imperial Manila, right? The political elite of Manila as an outsider, speaking in seemingly this very a regular way, right? Someone you would go have a beer with.
Yeah.
But to me, it's always been, I've never bought that narrative because I don't know anyone who curses that much, right?
Yeah.
Or in public, or is very, he has a very, he's very comfortable in the language of violence and misogynistic language. That's uncomfortable for me. And to me, that's not how regular people speak. So I don't know what they were saying, but maybe he spoke differently for politicians, which is not to say he spoke like a regular person, right? So I think he just fired up the imagination of people who were tired of the same old thing, right? He also fired up the imagination because I think a lot of the promises of the revolution were not fulfilled. And he was speaking to that, right? And he was also speaking to law and order at a time when crime was speaking. So I think he hit something that that resonated deeply with people because a lot of people voted for him. It wasn't because there were 5 candidates. You can never say it's a landslide, right?
Yeah.
But he won by a lot.
Yeah.
So I think he sparked something. That's how I see him. He was the right person for that time, but I'm not sure
If he's really the right person.
if he's still the right person. Exactly.
Well, I'm having goosebumps just the way you describe him. I mean, just subvert some of the languages that you use, some of the descriptions that you use. You might as well be talking about Trump.
Huh?
But you know what I mean? A populist president, who's misogynist. I mean, it's the whole thing, right?
Well, Manny, let me tell you, okay, when we premiered the film at Sundance, right? We premiered earlier, and I never mentioned, as you know, the Trump in the film. There's only 1 or 2 pictures of Trump and Duterte, and actually the same picture, just different points of view. A lot of people came up to me and said, "Wow, this is really seeming, it's so personal to me. Why is that?" And I'm like, "Well, why do you think?" Right? And they said, "Wow, this is really resonating. This is really resonating in this country." And then I knew it was hitting, right? Because it's so, I think they're playing from they're getting from the same playbook, this playbook of populism, right? Yeah. And sort of a playbook of also violence. I think the only difference, because it's not, well, it is also an issue in the US, in Manila, but not so much as race, right? Of course, there are indigenous rights in the Philippines, but that's not couched as a racial problem there. But I think that is a big difference, I think.
I mean, we still do have some racist problems, right? I mean, we all want to be white.
Oh, yes, that's true. It's very subtle. Yeah, the bleach is a big thing, right? Bleaching your skin. You're like, that's not, I wouldn't suggest bleaching your skin. This is true, right? I mean, they all look at all our big stars back home. They're fair. Fair is good, right? Yeah. Right? When you're born, when you have a baby, ang puti-puti. Right?
Right.
Like, that's the ultimate.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, before we go any further, though, I'm interested to know Ramona S. Diaz, the filmmaker. Tell us a brief history of how you got into filmmaking, Ms. Ramona.
Oh my goodness. So I went to school. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and I'm a martial law baby. So, Marcos was all I knew until I came to this country for college. I went to Emerson College, and then I was already very interested in photography. So I went to film school thinking I wanted to do fiction.
Yeah.
So after I graduated from Emerson in Boston, I lived in Los Angeles and worked in television in Los Angeles for a while. So I know LA too. It was episodic television. I'm dating myself here, but I worked on Remington Steele, Pierce Brosnan, and Stephanie Zimmer. Yeah, I know, right? It's like, wow, that's a long time ago. And then, but this was right about the time that when the show ended, because Pierce wanted to be Bond, or he became Bond. The show ended, and it was 1986, 87, just when the Marcoses left the Philippines, right? And the Philippines was sort of rebuilding itself, and I was so intrigued by that. So I went home. I went back, and that's when I got interested in documentaries, because so much was happening on the streets. We did with Monique Villonco, you know, Armida's Yon Reyna's daughter. We did a series called Apple Pie Patis at Iba Pa, and we traveled the world interviewing OFWs and expatriates.
Yeah.
But I think that was ahead of its time. I wish I could do it again. I really want to redo that series. And then after that, I really got into documentaries, but I thought, you know, I need to learn more about documentaries. So I came back to this country, went to grad school in the Bay Area. And then right after grad school, I did Imelda. And then I've never left documentaries. I'm wanting to transition to fiction right about now, but you know, it's like 5, 6 you know, feature-length documentaries later. Yeah, so I do a lot. Obviously, I do a lot of Filipino American stories made really for this audience, right? So I try to decode what happens in the Philippines for a Western audience. That's what I do.
Yeah. This is my follow-up question. So you've been thinking of creating feature films someday, right?
Yes, fiction. Yeah. So this pandemic obviously is not, you know, lockdown is so tough, right? But as I settle in to lockdown, which is a weird way of saying it, but I'm starting to write a lot of fiction, because after Motherland, which was my film before A Thousand Cuts, I was going to take a year off and do fiction, write my first fiction piece. But then A Thousand Cuts happened, right? You cannot not do A Thousand Cuts, right? It was the right story at the right time, and I would always regret it if I didn't do it.
Oh, and you should never regret. Now,
Exactly.
you touch up on this a while ago. Going back to A Thousand Cuts, what struck me is it's as much of a clarion call, not just for the Philippines, but for the world. And one of the most eye-opening scenes in the documentary is the misinformation problem, which is still a big problem now, you know. And if I remember the movie correctly, the United States is #1 in disinformation, followed by the Philippines. And thoughts on that?
You know, the country is a social media country. I believe everyone on the internet is on Facebook, right? 100% of people are on Facebook. So basically, Facebook is our internet, right? Because I believe Facebook comes with every phone, right? Yeah. It's free on every phone. Yeah. And I've always thought, and I've always wondered this. Listen, Manny, you know, when I went to the Philippines and I was shooting my first film, Imelda, right? In the early aughts, right? So 1999, 2000. Texting was already a very big thing there. Yeah. Texting was how people communicated. It was not a thing here. Yeah. I mean, texting was nowhere until maybe 2-3 years later. Yeah. But there, texting was the thing. That's how you communicate. And then social media, and then Facebook. To me, it makes so much sense because I think it's in line with a cultural character. It's in line with our national character, right? We're non-confrontational. We hate to say no. So we always say a version of, but we really mean no. And it's so easy to not be confrontational on social media, right? It's so easy to be anonymous and not have to say no to people's face when you really don't want to do something. So to me, it's like, oh yeah, okay, social media and texting, it really goes, it goes with our national character. I get it. I get why. And so, but now that social media has been weaponized in the Philippines and used by the administration to really spread disinformation and, you know, lies, untruths, right? Yeah. It's become scary. And then now there are real consequences because, as you saw in the film, Maria is such a victim of the trolls, and it becomes very gendered, and it becomes very it's violent rhetoric. It's scary.
Yeah. Here's how you affected me with the film, by the way. And I just realized that talking to you. Before, when I would receive emails or messages or posts, I see posts of my Facebook friends talking, you know, spreading misinformation, I would just kind of ignore it. Not anymore. I am more vigilant now. I do the fact check. I go to Snopes, any you know, reliable news source, and I correct them. I'm like, I am so sorry, but you have to do this. You know, because it's dangerous, especially now with the pandemic. I mean, you don't need any more misinformation, you know?
Wow, wait, so you've been doing that after you saw the film?
Yeah, I've been emailing.
Okay, my work here is done. I mean, my work is done. That's amazing. That's amazing to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's scary, right? I mean,
Uh,
I don't want, I have a journalistic heart as well. And so whenever they spread lies, I'm like, well, you can't anymore. I used to be much more nonchalant about it. Not anymore. I kind of want to put a little post now and saying, you probably had noticed that I've been very vigilant about your posts. It's,
that's great. You've been so proactive about it.
yeah,
Yeah, I should. Yeah, that's really amazing. And the things that we don't engage with, and sometimes I do that, and not all the time. So you're good about doing it all the time. But when I see absolutely, I'm like, well, that's really not true. Blah blah blah. So I reply. But the ones that we don't engage with are trolls, because
yeah,
I think especially paid trolls, and you know who they are, right?
yeah,
Um, because I think they're paid for every time someone engages with them. So to not engage with them is the best way, really. But to
right.
block them and report them,
Yeah,
right? Because they're, oh my gosh, the things that happen on Twitter overnight, it's
yeah,
incredible, because
yeah,
it's daytime in the Philippines. So when I wake up, I'm like, oh, so you have to, you have to block and report, but
yeah.
never engage. Yeah, I never engage with the trolls.
No, I only engage with my friends. So I'm like, oh my God, you seem like a very good person, but why are you, you know what I mean? I cannot put two and two together with them, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I mean, well, just
I think
yesterday
I know
though,
who you're talking about. They're my friends too.
well, just yesterday though, the big tech, namely Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Google, appeared before Congress to testify about their powers. What do you think can they do to curb misinformation?
Oh my goodness. This is a Maria question, so let me try to channel her what she
Yeah,
says, right? Because she thought about this really well. And I think yesterday they came to Congress for the antitrust,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But I don't think it's about antitrust. It's about really changing the DNA, right? The engineering of the platforms,
yeah,
because the platforms really micro target
yeah,
people,
yeah,
and really, really almost change behavior of people, and put us really into silos, right? We're more and more siloed into our own little worlds, right? So there's no public space
yeah.
in which we can really have discussion, because more and more, like when I see my Facebook page, I'm like, eh, wait, is it, not everyone is seeing this, because it's targeted for me, for my beliefs, for what I think, and even the ads, right? It's like, oh my god, they know I'm into masks, because I'm like obsessed with masks these
Yeah,
days.
yeah, yeah.
So more masks, right? But I know it's not okay. This is especially for me, so I think it is a it's their very business model, right? That's how they make money, the micro targeting. So that's what has to change. But how do you tell a company that the way they're making money is really inherently wrong and not good? That's tough, right? It goes
Yeah,
to the very heart of why they exist,
yeah,
right? It's a business. They make money.
yeah,
So I think that's it. It's not even content, right? Because content, um, like in the film, Maria says it's a whack-a-mole game.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then out here it goes, so it's even useless. So changing platform, going back to the platforms and changing the engineering of the platforms is what's really has to happen. Will it happen? That's a tough battle.
Speaking of Maria Ressa, what do you think of her fate? I mean, is there any fight left? And please say yes.
Yes, with Maria, there's always fight left.
Good. Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's why I think people are drawn to her, because the fight is never over, right? Until she wins, until we win, until something happens. No, the fight isn't over. For as long as people can go outside, as you know, what's happening, ABS-CBN was shut down, anti-terror law, and ABS-CBN happens to be the biggest broadcasting corporation in the Philippines. It's like if NBC was shut down, right?
Right.
Um, and I think there's a lot of protests. People want to protest,
Yeah.
right? They're protesting. There are noise barrages, but because of the pandemic, they stay in their cars. So what does that tell you? Obviously, that is a certain class that has a car to go to a noise barrage. It
Yeah.
can't only be a certain class to protest, right? It has to be everyone. So I think that, and I also think that all that energy, all that anger and grief over what's happening has to be harnessed by someone in the opposition. There is no leader in the opposition. Well, there's Lenny Robredo, but
Oh yeah.
right? I mean, but someone has to really harness that energy and organize and make it a movement. Right now, it's a feeling, right? But it's got to be a true organized movement, I think, in order for it to to be effective. Otherwise, people get tired, right? And then it'll peter out, and then
And then the cycle begins.
yeah,
You
and
know,
then what? And exactly.
cycle begins again. I mean, and that's yeah. So what about my biggest takeaway from your documentary, A Thousand Cuts, is your humanizing of Maria Ressa. I mean, I can absolutely say I love her and what she's fighting for, and I can
Oh,
identify as an immigrant like you. I could assume, right?
yes. So we always say, Maria is also, she's dual, so she's a Filipino American. She was born and I mean, at age 10 through college, she sort of came of age here. She grew
Yeah,
up in this country.
yeah,
I grew up in the Philippines and became an adult in this country.
yeah,
She became an adult in the Philippines because right after college she went there. So we always say we have opposite but very complementary lived experiences,
yeah,
right? Because I don't know what it's really like to be an adult in the Philippines because I've worked here most of my adult life and she's worked there all of her adult life.
yeah, yeah,
Even if she was CNN, even because she was in Jakarta, she was in Asia,
yeah,
basically. So I'm very aware that my films are through immigrant eyes, right? The gaze, the lens, obviously, because it can only be that because that is my experience, right?
yeah,
That is what I know, and I basically as a director, I sort of direct the gaze of the audience to what is really important for me, and to me that is uh, that that's the experience of being truly Filipino. To the things that are interesting, like in the elections, right?
yeah.
The singing and the dancing, but the menace too, and the all the spectacle is very interesting for
Yeah.
me, and very specifically Filipino.
Well, it is. I mean, look, our immigrant story, my immigrant story at least, is I live here, I work here, I love America, but nothing can change my love for the Philippines. I mean, I love ako ay Filipino. I'm through and through, right? From food to move to anything to culture, you know.
Yeah. No, someone asked me, so what is the difference? I say I have two homes. When
Yeah,
I'm in the Philippines, I say I'm going home, which is the US. When I'm here in the US and I'm going back to the Philippines, I say I'm going home. And my daughter, who's born here, raised here, could never understand what that meant, right? But and I explained it to her. I'm like, when I'm in the Philippines, I never ever have to say, in the Manila or in the Philippines, this is how we do it, right? Because everything is just taken for granted, and I love the comfort of that. It's
yeah.
very reassuring. But I do have two homes. We're in this liminal space where one foot is here, one foot is there, and I think it's a good place to be as a documentary filmmaker and as a journalist, right? We're observers.
Yeah. Now, this one line resonates with me the most. We feel like criminals doing our jobs. And I believe, Miss Ramona, we're certainly doing our jobs. Congratulations on 1,000 cuts again.
Thank you so
It's
much.
not just a think piece, it has so much raw emotions. Thank you for that. And thank you for your time. Watch 1,000 Cuts, one of my
Thank
favorite, if not the most important movie you'll see this year.
Thanks, Manny.